The elevation of the barrel is controlled here with this switch, which brings the carriage up to the top. You notice there's a safety switch at the top that kills the up leg of the carriage of the switch, rather, but the down leg stays hot. This is the main axle on the carriage, and this entire assembly rides on this axle, and the pitch of the system is controlled by loosening this handle. This is a rotation lock, so it's open right now, and it can be locked down nice and tight, and now the system will not rotate. To rotate it, free this handle up, which is simply a caliper on a disc. Free that handle, and when you do free that handle, depending on how much load you have out here, you could have more than one drill out there and a T-bar. That determines what kind of preload you need on this bolt, or more precisely on this lock nut. The tighter this is, the stiffer this whole assembly is to turn by hand. So right now I have it loaded up for this job. This 2 TE70s be used on this unit, so it's rather stiff, and if I want to change angles, I'm going to put a large load out here to get it to turn up or down. If I'm doing a lot of angle changes, I may not want this to be quite as stiff, but if it's too loose, this brake can be overwhelmed by the load that's sitting out here at the end. These are the forward legs, front legs of the DrillBoss, and they can be retracted back into the main base by pulling this pin, taking a little load off of the wheels so that this leg will slide, and then this leg will retract back into where this hole lines up with that hole, and the pins can go back in. That puts your wheels about here. That just allows you to get perhaps right up next to a wall if you're doing down drilling next to a wall. Otherwise, they can stay in the out position. You don't want to drill laterally in this configuration with the wheels retracted, because you don't have enough support and you may get forward tipping. So it's important to leave these out unless you need to get up close to a wall or you're working on the edge of a slab doing down drilling. There are a number of circumstances where you might benefit from retracting these back in here, but if you don't need it, the default should be in the extended position. The DrillBoss has 4 wheels, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. The 2 in the back have a foot actuated lock, pretty stiff. Step on it to activate it and kick the top to deactivate it. And there's one on each side in the back. Some operators have found that they don't need to lock the wheels once they get comfortable using the DrillBoss. The 12-volt DC winch here is used for elevation control of the carriage, so up and down. And this is the power unit, the supply. The deep cycle 12-volt battery is housed in here, as well as the charging circuit, which lives here. There's a charger supplied, a smart charger supplied with the unit that plugs in right here at night. There's also a master switch here, which simply kills the control here. Good for shipping or moving around. Now the unit is on. Just a quick review of the contents of the power supply. We have 2 circuits coming off of the battery, both of which are fused. This is a winch fuse here, and this is a charging fuse here. You can open those if you need to for servicing. But both hot legs are fused at the battery, which is important. We have a relay here, and then inside we have the charging port, and the master switch is beneath that port. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward. It's clean, and should not require any service. And this is a deep cycle battery, which will allow you to do deep discharges on it between your charging cycle. Obviously, it's good practice to keep your batteries charged, but this will allow you to really drain the battery down pretty low without damaging the battery. Control circuit exiting the box into the tower, and that is going up to the main up-down switch, and then also just in here the limit switch that lives at the top. Here's the tab. This tab is important that it not be bent out of position, because it acts to depress this limit switch here. And if it's not in position, this switch may not be activated, in which case you will damage the unit, because the winch is very powerful. And the carriage has 4 large rollers that ride up the inside of the 2 tower legs. The barrel of the DrillBoss has 2 roller bearings sets, one in the back on the top and one in the front on the bottom when viewed from a normal horizontal drilling position. So here would be this should be your normal horizontal drilling position. So you've got one in the back here and one in front underneath. And the idea behind that is quite simply, without these and a really large load out here, let's say 2 TE70s and a T-bar with bits and maybe vacuum attachments, whatever, big load out here, as you're extending, as you're drilling, and this arm gets longer and longer, this bar wants to bind inside the barrel with just contact friction. And we can change that with these to rolling friction, and it makes drilling at every load much easier. They are adjustable. There are set screws inside here that can increase and decrease the pressure of these based on the load you have out here. When they get shipped, they have fairly default catch-all pressure, but you may find with a lighter load you could loosen it up slightly. The measure is quite simply the resistance you feel in the hand wheel as you're turning it. And right now it's butter. It should be just 1 finger operation. And even when you get loads on there, you should be able to maintain that by adjusting these to the sweet spot. The DrillBoss has a gearbox with a shifter, 3 positions. There's forward, neutral, and reverse. And that simply activates this pawl you see here underneath this gear. And here's the pawl, and here it is in neutral where neither tooth is contacting the gear. There it is forward, and there it is in reverse. If it's in gear, the idea is that it will only go in one direction. If it's in neutral, it's free to spin. When you're doing horizontal drilling, there's no need to use the gears. It's not required. If you're drilling down or you're drilling up, then you may find you're going to need to use a gear so that the system doesn't respond to gravity by falling down or falling out, falling in or falling out, depending on whether you're going up or down drilling mode. Otherwise, just leave it in neutral. Okay, here's a video of the basic setup for the saddle. We've got a large drill in here. It's the Hilti TE70. The saddle consists of 2 sets of polymer grippers, a front and a back. It has a sliding back plate here, which slides up and down in this track to accommodate smaller and larger drills. There's the big picture. At the top of it, it's extended almost all the way here. You can see here we don't have much left because we've got such a large drill in here. And at the top, there is a collar. This is a large collar for a large drill. We do have smaller collars. The collar also has a depth stop mount built onto it. There's a depth stop that comes with your drill. Simply insert it in here, lock it down, and then you can adjust the height of the stop up and down depending on what the depth of your hole is, what that depth requirement is. On the other side of the polymers, we have these 1/4-20 plastic knobs. These knobs are at the end of these bolts. This bolt and the back bolt bring the 2 polymers together. You need a 7/16 wrench when tightening these just to hold on to this end of the bolt, and then you can hand tighten once you've locked that other end. The polymers also serve to house the trigger cable. This cable runs from here down to the shifter. This is a friction shifter, so once you turn the drill on, then you can leave it and the drill will stay on for the duration of the job. And then when you're done, just turn it off, and then it basically acts just as a throttle. You can feather the drill with this. If your drill has feathering, you can see that it has a stop along the way for feathering the trigger if you should need it. With a system like this, you really don't need it. When you're starting a hole by hand, oftentimes you will, but this is going to offer you a lot more guidance, so you probably won't need that. Okay, so the trick to installing this, I have the drill kicked out at an angle right now, but we're looking to get the bit plumb to the saddle, and that requires these polymers to be adjusted. They can go in or out depending on the size of the drill. You want this polymer essentially underneath the bit, so you're coming down to this polymer. So you adjust this one, and then this one follows out to the end of the handle. It's important not to over tension this gripper, because you can overwhelm the polymer handle of the drill, and it binds the trigger assembly. So you might be able to turn it on with this cable, but when you release the action, it may not come back out because it's binding in the casing of the drill. So it's pretty important that you test that this trigger will come all the way back out and is not being bound by too much tension on this particular bolt. This one typically doesn't matter. You can put a little more load on it because there's nothing really going on down here. It's just dead handle. So you want to get a good grip on that. Once you've found those positions, there's a lock ring, Allen key, hex key for this. This will slide along here depending on where you put this. When you found the home for this piece, slide this in to seat it on the back and lock it down. This will keep the polymer from wanting to scoot out as the drill takes impact cycles. So this is pretty important. Sometimes you may have a large spine on your drill body, and you may need this to sit further out, further that way in your saddle to accommodate the spine. In which case, this is adjustable here, and this whole thing, loosen this lock nut, and this whole thing just floats. This bolt floats inside this piece of steel, so it'll just go in that way, and then you can lock it back down with a second nut. The trigger assembly, depending on, again, what drill you have in here, the line of action can be really interesting. Some drills have triggers out here, in which case you may need to adjust the line of action of your actuator here, the trigger line. And to do that, you can loosen this, which allows this aluminum rod to slide in and out, which will let you adjust the line of action for specialty triggers. And then simply lock this back down and it's fixed. When you want to take the drill out, you can either take this aluminum rod all the way out with you, or you can simply undo this keeper nut, bolt here, screw rather, and this wire, the trigger wire, will come out of a hole that it's floating in there. It's only locked in by this thing compressing it into the hole.